Lately, we've been getting a lot of new updates on upcoming projects for the DCU, and it appears that we may finally have an idea as to what we can expect from the first couple of years of the DCU Chapter 1, Gods and Monsters. And it is seemingly quite different from the original slate reveal that we got all the way back in January of 2023, and in this video, I want to break down all of the rumored and confirmed projects in development, and I want to try to predict the roadmap for the next couple of years of DC Studios, breaking down all of the projects you could potentially see from both the DCU and DC Elseworlds. Of course, when it comes to the roadmap itself, this is just an estimate based on stuff that we've heard from James Gunn himself, what's been reported on by the trades, and what is rumored to be in development at DC Studios. So when it comes to specifically like the release dates, and I am confident about some of these things when they might be slotting in like 2027 or 2028, I'm sure it's going to change drastically over the next couple of years, as again, just looking back in January 2023, when DC Studios first announced those 10 projects, a lot of those are not even anywhere close to coming out, and it seems like some of them have already been canceled, so I'm sure some of these rumored projects in development, or some of them that have even been confirmed by James Gunn himself, very likely could stall in development and may never see the light of day. But that's enough rambling. Let's talk about all the confirmed and rumored projects in development at DC Studios and try to predict what you can expect from DC over the next couple of years. Of course, we already know that the DCU is going to be back very soon with the release of Peacemaker Season 2 coming out in August of 2025, and I'm absolutely so excited. I loved Peacemaker Season 1. I do understand why some people weren't really into it. It's very raunchy, and at sometimes it's almost too stupid, but I absolutely adored Team Peacemaker, and I cannot wait to see what they're going to be up to in the DCU and how they're going to tie the events of Season 1 into this new DCU, if they're even going to do that at all. But after Peacemaker Season 2, there's going to be a little hiatus until 2026 where we have 3 confirmed projects: Supergirl, Lanterns, and Clayface, 2 of which already have a release date, Supergirl coming out in June of 2026 and Clayface coming out in September. The only project that is yet to get a official release date is Lanterns. However, it is heavily rumored that Lanterns will be coming out before Supergirl sometime in early 2026, which does make sense considering they already wrapped filming on the show. And I'm really excited for the projects that they have in 2026, most notably Lanterns, which is probably my most anticipated DC project over the next couple of years outside of the Batman 2. I just absolutely love the creative team that they've assembled for the show with the likes of Damon Lindelof and Chris Mundy, and I really do love the cast that they put together, including Kyle Chandler as an older version of Hal Jordan, which I know is a touchy subject for some people, as a lot of people do not like the fact that they're going with an older version of Hal Jordan, which for the most part I completely agree with. I would have definitely preferred to see a Hal Jordan in his prime who could have been a pillar for the DCU for the next 10 years if the DCU goes on for that long. However, that's sadly just not the world we live in, and I've accepted that fact, and if you're going to cast an older Hal Jordan, I think Kyle Chandler is absolutely perfect for that role, and I cannot wait to see what he brings in the show. And on top of that, I think one of the better castings already in the DCU is selecting Aaron Pierre to play Jon Stewart, who is an absolute rising star, and I think these are the exact type of actors that DC needs to be casting, because it's only going to bring more people into the DCU fandom. And there's also so much about the show. For example, having Sinestro as well as some of the other rumored villains that are potentially going to be in the show. I just think this is setting up to be an absolute home run of a show, and I cannot wait for Lanterns. But of course, the headliner for the DCU in 2026 is going to be the Supergirl movie, and I thought Supergirl's cameo in Superman was an absolute delight, and I cannot wait to see more of Millie Alcock's Supergirl, who I think again seems like a potential home run casting for the DCU, as she is an immensely talented actress, and she feels like she's ripped right off the page of Tom King's Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, which is such a phenomenal comic, and I'm so glad that they are using it as inspiration for this movie. Obviously, it's not going to be a one-for-one adaptation, as there will be major changes. Most notably, we already know the inclusion of Jason Momoa's Lobo, which is just awesome as well, and it seems quite evident that Gunn and company are very confident in this film, as the writer Anna Nogueira has already been tasked with writing scripts for 2 other major DC films that we will talk about later in this video. And of course, the final project of 2026 being Clayface, which is something that I'm cautiously optimistic about. I love the concept because I love the idea of having varying tones in your connected universe in order to add variety, and I think it's a smart idea to make smaller budget movies. Currently, Clayface is rumored to have somewhere between a $40 and $60 million budget, and I truly think if the film is good, it'll be a great investment. Additionally, I'm all for DC working with great creatives like Mike Flanagan, and I hope he's the first of many interesting creatives who comes to DC, pitches a script, and gets the project made. However, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say I think Clayface is the most interesting character, and that I did not wish perhaps another character was getting this opportunity. However, I'm curious to see how it turns out, and I do like the concept of these sorts of projects, even if I think it may have been a bit wiser to have a more solid foundation set within the DCU first. And I do think those are going to be the only 3 projects that we see in 2026. There are some things that seem like could begin filming very soon. However, I don't see them at all reaching a 2026 release date unless they're much further ahead than we've been led to believe by comments from James Gunn and the trade. But now moving into 2027, 2027, there is only one confirmed project on the release schedule for that year as of right now, and that is the Batman 2, which I do think will hold its October 2027 release date. I know there is some worry that the film still could potentially be canceled in favor of the DCU version of the character, but I just don't see it happening. Even though I do think Superman is a success and is a great beginning for the DCU, the Batman franchise is still DC's most valuable movie franchise as of right now, and I just don't see them canceling the Batman 2. It'd be a seriously stupid decision by WB, and you'd just be burning money at that point, because I do think it's very possible that the Batman 2 is the biggest movie that DC puts out at the box office over the next couple of years. And when it comes to my overall excitement for the project, I am so excited. It's my most anticipated movie over the next couple of years, and I just cannot wait for cameras to start rolling on this project so we can get all of the bullshit discourse over the last couple of years about this movie behind us, and we can just start looking forward to the Batman. I don't care if it's in the DCU, I don't care if it's Elseworld, I just want to see this movie. But to be clear, for the sake of this video, I'm still operating on the assumption that there are going to be two different Batman franchises, and we'll talk about the other one in a little bit. But of course, now we get into the speculation, because there is nothing else confirmed past the Batman 2, and there's certainly going to be more than just the Batman 2 in 2027. And keeping it with the movies, I do think the other major film that we're going to be getting in 2027 is going to be the Superman kind of sequel thing that James Gunn has been hinting at over the Superman press tour, where it's going to be a movie that features Superman a lot but isn't a direct Superman sequel. Of course, when this was first talked about, a lot of people thought it was World's Finest. James Gunn confirmed that it is not World's Finest. I personally believe it's going to be a Supergirl and Superman movie, as they are going to be the faces of the DCU after 2026, and I think pairing them together does definitely fit the description of a movie that heavily features Superman but isn't maybe just a true Superman sequel. Of course, it could be something else, but we're just going to say the next James Gunn movie, because he's writing it as of right now and he's almost certainly going to direct it, and I don't think they're going to sideline Superman for more than 2 years. Maybe it's 2028, but James Gunn can work pretty efficiently, and I do think it's kind of like the most clear option for what could be coming out in 2027. But of course, there are other movies that are candidates for this spot if, say, this James Gunn movie comes out in 2028, or they want to specifically do two DCU movies outside of the Batman 2 in 2027. And the most obvious one, and it seemed like it was gearing up eventually to come out in 2027, is Sergeant Rock. However, over the last couple of weeks, we've gotten some disappointing updates about the film, most notably that Luca Guadagnino has stepped away from the movie. Now, of course, James Gunn has reiterated that they're still developing the project, but if you want my honest opinion, this screams a movie that's just going to be stuck in development hell and probably will not see the light of day anytime soon, unless Luca Guadagnino does come back to the project. And honestly, I'm totally fine with that. The main draw for Sergeant Rock, in my opinion, was Luca Guadagnino's involvement. Having a director like that step into the DCU just sounded so awesome to me. I love so many of his films, and if he's not attached to it, I honestly don't really care. Of course, they could get another phenomenal director, and I'm not trying to disparage the character of Sergeant Rock, who I think could make for a really awesome movie. A throwback war movie in the DCU does sound pretty dope, but I'm gonna be honest, it's another character kind of like Clayface, where it feels like there's probably other characters that you could do first to set the world, and then you could go into these weird pockets of the DC universe. Again, if they do want to take it on and they nail the script and it's something they just have to make, I'm all for it. However, I just don't think this is going to be coming out anytime soon, and I don't think it's going to be in 2027 if it ever does come out. But there is one other project that I do think could make a 2027 release date, even though I will admit I think it's probably more likely a 2028 release date, and that is Wonder Woman, which we got confirmation that Anna Nogueira, who wrote Supergirl, is currently writing that movie, and it definitely seems like DC is trying to fast track this. Now, of course, they are not going to go into production on something without a finished script, so if the script doesn't come together, it may be even longer than that. However, it definitely seems like there is a concerted effort to get Wonder Woman out and be at the forefront of the DCU, which I think is an absolutely wise decision, because she's a badass character and so important to DC. You do not want her sidelined for too long. And say the script's finished by the end of the year and they could begin filming in, say, late spring, early summer next year, it could meet a later 2027 release date. But I'll admit, I'm probably going to put this in 2028 because that just seems more likely. I don't know how far along they're already in writing the script. I'm sure she's been working on it before it was announced this past week, but I definitely think it's a priority, and I could see this being the other DCU movie if they wanted to have two DCU movies specifically alongside the Batman 2 in 2027. But now let's talk about the TV that we can expect in 2027, and I think there's one clear project that seems to be lining up for a 2027 release date, and that is the Blue Beetle animated series, as it was confirmed recently that the show would be going into production in early 2026 by the actor for Jaime Reyes, who I'm not going to butcher his name, he doesn't deserve that, but if that is true and they're going to start production in early 2026, a 2027 release date seems totally in the cards, and I think that's a great thing to have because I really do love the Blue Beetle movie from 2023, and I absolutely want to see more of Jaime in this universe, and hopefully he gets to cross over into the Booster Gold show, which we're going to talk about in a couple of seconds. But there's also another animated series that I think we could be seeing in 2027, and that is Creature Commandos Season 2. It is currently being written, and that's a show that obviously already has its showrunner. It has all of its characters and stuff planned out. It's just determining what they want to do with Season 2, and I think 2027 makes a lot of sense, as at the end of 2027, it's already going to be 3 years since the release of Creature Commandos Season 1, so I think 2027 fits the bill. However, I do suspect there is going to be a live action series, and this is where we're going to get a little bit more into the rumor territory, and that is because one project that seemingly has been greenlit and seems like it could go into production pretty soon is a Jimmy Olsen TV series. Again, I want to make it clear, this is a rumored project, but a lot of steam has been picking up, and it seems like a lot of the leakers, who I know we don't like to trust leakers all the time, but the ones that are usually pretty reliable when it comes to DC Studios are very confident that this is going to happen, and that is a Jimmy Olsen series that is going to be a crime anthology series focused on different DC villains, hosted by Skylar Gizondo's Jimmy Olsen. And I think it sounds like it could be fun. I do love the idea of building out the DC universe by getting us introduced to new villains that inhabit the DCU. And if rumors are to be believed, this does seem like the live action series that is the furthest along in its development, and I do think it probably is going to be the one live action series that we get in 2027, unless something drastically changes where we get a surprise announcement that something is going to begin filming, say, early next year. So for a quick little recap, my overall predictions for 2027 are The Batman 2, the James Gunn Superman kind of sequel thing that he's working on, Blue Beetle the animated series, Creature Commandos Season 2, and the Jimmy Olsen series as the projects that we're getting in 2027, with potentially Wonder Woman maybe getting in, but I most likely think it's going to be 2028. And this is pretty close to what they've said they wanted to do production-wise. Now, ideally, they say they want to do 2 live-action movies, an animated movie, as well as 2 live-action shows and 2 animated series per year, but I don't know if they're going to be meeting that production quota by 2027. If I'm being honest, it doesn't really look like it, just based on what we know is filming and going to begin filming soon. Of course, a lot of this can change in the next couple of months, and maybe there's more stuff shoved into 2027, but just for the sake of this roadmap idea, I wanted to be a bit conservative, and I assume in 2028 is probably at the latest when we're going to be getting the full-fledged This Is the DC Studios up and running and hitting their quotas each year like they'd like to. But now, getting into 2028, we actually do have a movie on the release schedule, and that is the dynamic duo animated movie that is going to be featuring Dick Grayson and Jason Todd. Now, as of right now, we don't know if this is going to be a DCU production. If we had to guess, I would say most likely it's going to be DC Elseworlds, but it definitely could be fitted into the DCU. We just don't even know enough about the character of Batman right now to jump to that conclusion, but I am so excited for this. It seems like a completely different type of animation style. I think DC has been leaving a lot of money on the table by not embracing animation more, and it's being written by one of the people who wrote Coco, so I have immensely high expectations for this film, and I cannot wait. But what's another live action movie that could fit into 2028 and could be paired with Wonder Woman, which I expect is going to be coming out in that year? And I think the most obvious answer is going to be The Brave and the Bold. And I tend to believe James Gunn when he says he wants to have 2 different Batman, one in the DCU and of course the Matt Batman. Now, maybe somebody at WB is going to try to pressure James Gunn to having just one Batman and combining the universes, but for the sake of this video, we're not going to go into the whole Batman discourse because it's exhausting, and we're not going to have any clarity probably for another year or 2. Maybe in Clayface we get a little bit of clarity, but outside of that, we're probably going to be waiting until after the Batman 2, and the earliest I see The Brave and the Bold coming out is 2028, considering James Gunn recently confirmed that with these Batman movies, they are not going to be coming out in the same calendar year, and the Batman 2 is much closer to entering production than The Brave and the Bold. And I truthfully don't believe there's any scenario where we're waiting past 2028 to get the live action introduction of the Batman in the DCU. The only way where that happens and The Brave and the Bold does not come out in 2028, in my opinion, is if they merge the 2 universes, which again, I don't believe is going to happen, so I definitely think you can almost write in pen that we are getting The Brave and the Bold in 2028 if we are getting a new version of Batman. Another movie that's directly related to The Brave and the Bold and is in development at DC Studios is Teen Titans, and for a little bit I honestly thought this could have a 2028 release date, considering a report came out last week that a script had already been turned in, but James Gunn confirmed today that there is no finished script for Teen Titans, as Anna Nogueira, who is working on Teen Titans, has been working on Wonder Woman for quite some time, so 2028 definitely seems out of the equation unless somebody's already taken over writing the project. But also, when we think about the timeline of the DCU, it really doesn't make any sense for the movie to come out before The Brave and the Bold, unless it is potentially a prequel movie where it's going to focus perhaps on Dick Grayson as Robin, which I definitely think maybe is a possibility, but I've always been under the impression that this is going to be a Damian Wayne-led Teen Titans film, and they're going to establish him first in The Brave and the Bold. I certainly want a Teen Titans movie. It's kind of ridiculous we have had to wait this long to get the Teen Titans in live action. However, it does seem like at the absolute earliest it's going to be 2029, which is kind of sad because I will admit I was actually pretty excited for this, but I definitely think we are going to get a Teen Titans project project at some point during the DCU's first chapter. So just a quick recap of what I predict we're going to be getting movie-wise from DC Studios in 2028. We are going to be getting most likely The Brave and the Bold, Dynamic Duo, and Wonder Woman, which I'm going to put in 2028 with the small caveat that if production really picks up and a script is finished by the end of this year, 2027 is possible, but I do find it to be quite unlikely. And when it comes to Teen Titans, I'm putting a 2029 at the earliest prediction when it comes to that film. But of course, what are the shows that are looking like they could be a 2028 release? And I think the first one that comes to mind is Booster Gold, which it was recently announced that David Jenkins is working on the pilot for the show, and he is best known for his work on Our Flag Means Death, and he's going to be picking up where Danny McBride left off. Of course, there is no guarantee that Jenkins' pilot gets picked up and the series is ordered for production, but due to the fact that they went out of their way to officially announce it, and the fact that there's already been a first showrunner in Danny McBride, it seems like it is a true priority over at DC Studios, so I definitely think we are probably going to be getting this show pretty soon, and it does slot in pretty well for a 2028 release date. And I can't speak to the quality of David Jenkins' work in Our Flag Means Death. I know a lot of people really love the show, but I myself have not seen it, but I cannot wait for Booster Gold. It does sound like it is not going to be Camille Nanjiani playing the character, or at least that was reported by the trade, so as of right now, it's a pretty blank slate, and hopefully we get it soon because Booster Gold is a phenomenal, fun character, and I really do think lends himself very well for a television series. And when it comes to potentially what other live action series or animated series for that matter we could see in 2028, your guess is as good as mine, and that's going to lead us into our next section where we're going to abandon the roadmap idea and just focus on all of the confirmed and rumored projects in development, and I'll give a brief breakdown of where it seems they're headed and whether or not they're actually going to see the light of day anytime soon, because we just don't have enough information on some of these projects to even think that they can make a 2028 release date or even 2029. For all we know, some of these projects have been canceled behind the scenes, and it would just be complete guesswork trying to predict the release dates of stuff in 2029, as the release schedule is almost certainly going to change drastically, at least for the 2027 and 2028 projects. I thought I had a pretty reasonable argument for why they could fit there. I'm sure some of you disagree with my arguments, but from this point on, we're just breaking down the projects. And I want to kick off by talking about the Deathstroke and Bane movie written by Matthew Orton, because apparently the script for the film has already been turned into DC Studios. Now, we have no information as to whether or not James Gunn and Peter Safran thought that the script was good enough to enter production. I'm sure there's going to be several drafts for the script itself, but this is one that has not been officially confirmed by James Gunn or Peter Safran, but it has been reported on by the trade. So I certainly think that this is a film in development. It's just going to come down to whether or not James Gunn and Peter Safran, it's worth the investment of time and money to produce, similar to Mike Flanagan's Clayface script. I definitely think it's possible. However, I just have no idea where to peg this in a release schedule at all, because I do think it is a bit of an odd movie idea. Of course, Deathstroke and Bane are awesome, and I would love to see a more comic accurate version of Bane in live action, and also Deathstroke is a character that it certainly seems like James Gunn is a huge fan of and wants to get into the DCU. So I certainly think it's possible we see this movie. It's just going to come down to the overall script quality, because this is not a project where I see them kind of just like banging their head in a wall. If the script doesn't work, it doesn't work, and I think they're going to move on. It's not like Wonder Woman or Batman where they're just going to keep trying over and over until they get the script right. This falls in much more in line with something like Clayface or Sergeant Rock, where these are creatives seemingly coming in and pitching ideas, and if the script is up to snuff, they will make it. If it's not, they're going to probably put it to the wayside and move on to something else. And due to the fact that we have not heard from James Gunn or Peter Safran yet, I definitely think this is a 50-50 as of right now. One movie that I sadly don't think we're going to be seeing anytime soon, if at all, is going to be The Authority, and I think that's a bummer. Now, I do think The Authority still could play a very large role in the DCU. Obviously, the Engineer was a part of Superman, and I do think The Authority makes a lot of sense as the first villain for a Justice League movie, where the Justice League kind of rises up to show the world how a correct hero team would go about their business, in contrast to the Authority, who is not afraid to kill to get things done. But it sounds like the development of the film has been really rough, as there's still not a turned-in script for the movie, and it was rumored that James Gunn may even direct the film himself, but it does definitely seem like it's hit a bit of stall in development. It was rumored that it could potentially turn into an animated movie, but I will admit the idea of a $150 million or $200 million The Authority movie does sound like a huge risk that I don't know would be necessarily profitable for DC Studios, as it's not a team that anybody really outside of comic books knows any of the names of. I definitely think they could serve a major story purpose in the DCU, and I hope we get to see them. However, I just don't think The Authority movie is ever going to happen. Another movie that I don't see coming out over the next couple of years, if at all, is going to be James Mangold's Swamp Thing. I definitely think that they want to do something with Swamp Thing, and I definitely think eventually we're going to get a Swamp Thing movie in the DCU. I just have no idea if it's going to be James Mangold, because he is seemingly going to start production soon on his Star Wars movie, which for sure is going to take at least the next 2 years of his life. So it's going to have to be starting production after that, and based on all the information we know, there isn't a complete script for the movie. There is a co-writer that is currently working on it, but it just really comes down to whether or not James Mangold is going to do Star Wars or Swamp Thing first, and all the rumors suggest that his Star Wars project is a bit further along, and it's most likely what he's going to begin development on next, so they're going to have to wait until he's done with that to really start production on this Swamp Thing movie, unless it's a situation like Mike Flanagan's pitch for Clayface, where they really like James Mangold's script if he eventually turns it in anytime soon, and they find a different director to actually helm and direct the project. However, I would much rather they just wait until James Mangold turns in the script and is able to direct it himself, and if that's the case, we most likely are going to be waiting a couple of years before any real production on that movie ever starts, which I'm totally fine with. Of course, I want to see Swamp Thing, but I do also want to have Swamp Thing in the hands of a creative I trust, and I'm totally fine to wait a couple of extra years to get a well-made Swamp Thing project. Of course, it's no guarantee that James Mangold would have a good Swamp Thing project, but the idea of James Mangold handling and directing a Swamp Thing movie sounds like an absolute delight to me, and I hope it does see the light of day. We just might be waiting a little longer than maybe some of us want to. However, that wraps up all the movies. Let's get on to the TV shows. And to start off, let's talk about Waller, which seemed like a show that was going to be coming out fairly early on in the DCU. However, it does seem like it has hit a lot of bumps in the road during its development over at HBO. And I'll be honest, I just don't think this show's ever happening. I know James Gunn has said on multiple occasions that he's really excited about it. It is still in active development, and I am sure it is, but making a Waller series just doesn't really move the needle for me. I think you could feature Waller heavily in other projects, and I've always preferred Waller being more of a mysterious character. I don't need to know her full upbringing and backstory. However, if they do it, I hope it turns out good. I just don't see this happening anytime soon, and it does seem like it has hit quite a lull in its production, and it does seem like, in my opinion, it's going to probably be canceled, or at least sidelined in favor of other projects that they're working on, and that's something I want to be very clear about in this. I don't think just because we're not getting it anytime soon doesn't mean that we're never going to see perhaps an Amanda Waller series. I just think most likely other things in the production schedule are going to pass it, and DC instead, on multiple occasions, they don't want to have like 5 TV shows a year, so something like Waller I just think might just keep getting passed up in line by things like Booster Gold, this Jimmy Olsen series that we've been talking about, as well as other shows that I'm sure are going to be announced in the next couple of years, which take a priority because they probably already have a script finished and can enter production. And I think a similar problem is perhaps falling upon Paradise Lost, which again we've heard very little about. James Gunn said there was some momentum on the project about a year ago, but it does seem like perhaps it's been passed up in favor of just focusing on Wonder Woman, which I do think is a wiser strategy. You can always go back and tell the lore of Themyscira, and I think that's a great idea, making a Game of Thrones style show about that. I most certainly would want to watch it, but I think you are much wiser to establish Wonder Woman first and then deep dive into her world. I don't know what the story of Paradise Lost was going to be. It maybe was a prequel to Wonder Woman, maybe it was going to happen concurrently with what's happening in the events of like Superman, stuff like that. But again, with shows like this where they've been announced for several years and we haven't gotten any substantial real production information about it, it does seem like the development has gone a bit cold, and we might be waiting to see this show if we do ever get it down the line. But of course, something has to jump ahead of these because there are going to be several shows each year from DC Studios, and one of those that I think most likely is probably jumped ahead of something like Waller and even Paradise Lost is a Mr. Terrific spin-off series, which was reported on by the Wall Street Journal as something that James Gunn is considering, alongside a Jimmy Olsen series, which is something that seems very close to entering production like we talked about earlier, and I think this is a phenomenal idea. Mr. Terrific was an absolute scene stealer within Superman and is a character that DC would be very wise to put more time into. I would love to see the backstory more of Mr. Terrific in this universe, and just more time with Eddie Gathiegi's Mr. Terrific is time well spent, and I think this is a very wise investment if DC does want to leapfrog something in the production schedule. Get this Mr. Terrific show out now, as he is a character that I could see really rising in popularity over the next couple of years. But I will say this could also be a Terrifics project, which would be more of an ensemble cast with characters like Metamorpho and even a Plastic Man, which it was rumored that Darren Aronofsky had potentially pitched a Plastic Man movie to DC Studios, and that's one of those really random rumors where it's so damn specific and weird that I almost want to believe that it's true, but we've heard nothing about this movie ever since. I believe it was like last fall when this rumor broke, so honestly I don't believe it's going to happen, but that was just a random rumor where I was kind of excited because again, I'm all for great creatives coming to DC Studios, pitching their ideas and seeing if it can fit within the DCU or DC Elseworlds. But again, I don't think this is going to happen, and I do think a Terrific show would be a really fun idea, and that'd be a great way to introduce Plastic Man. And again, anything with Mr. Terrific I'm all for because he is an absolute standout in the DCU right now. Another rumored show in development is a Huntress series, and if rumors are to be believed, and this comes from Nexus Point News, who has been truly the best when it comes to getting scoops on DC Studios, and I really do believe a lot of the stuff that they do put out, you should definitely give them a follow, is the fact that this Huntress series is going to be set in Korea and almost be entirely spoken in Korean, and is one of the first of DC Studios' international slate where they aim to have the series set in an international setting, the series being written and spoken in the country's respective language, and a cast composed of actors from that respective country. And if this is true, I think it's a phenomenal idea because it opens the door for so many more unique stories, and it'd be very wise for DC to focus on trying to grow the brand internationally where it seemingly is struggling. Now, there are a couple of other animated TV series in development at DC Studios, but they seem to be clearly set outside of the DCU, like My Adventures with Superman, My Adventures with Green Lantern, and a Mr. Miracle series, which I'd give maybe like a 15% chance of joining the DCU. However, this is going to wrap it up for this video. These are all the confirmed and rumored projects as of right now that you can expect from DC over the next couple of years. And I'd love to know what projects of this slate you're excited for, or if you're even excited for the future of DC, if these are the projects that we're going to be getting over the next couple of years. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in another video.